grown adults yelling at each other for what they want to eat, even if they've improved. Make it make sense. What's up, everybody? Coach Rob here, back with another video, and this is a video I did not want to make because oddly I wound up in a bizarre internet war that I didn't want to be in. And I will say right out of the gate, it hasn't been a hard-fought battle on my end, because I do think people out there are intelligent enough, if they know me and they know my background, that including me in this silliness is going to be counterproductive for them. What do I mean? Well, the quick backstory, because I don't want to be long-winded, because people don't like long videos anymore. They have short attention spans. Long story short, I went through a 7-month competition prep, as many of you know if you follow me. That started back in April and ended about 3 weeks ago when I had a successful competition result. And during that 7 months, when you're in a competition prep, which I would argue is one of the hardest things anyone could ever do, you do have tunnel vision. You kind of have to separate yourself from the real world to some degree. So for that 7 months, it was all about calculating food, making sure my training was on point, making sure my recovery was on point, getting the little bit of cardio in that I did, and apart from that, just spending time with my family, who are awesome and extremely supportive of that endeavor. Because you do have to kind of live like a monk a little bit and keep yourself free of all the distractions out there. One of those distractions is the internet and social media at large, and I'll admit that I wasn't quite as active in it as I normally would be because of everything that I have going on. And not only did I have a very serious hard contest preparation to go through, but I was also neck deep in a kitchen remodel that's been going on literally since January. It's totally kicking my ass, but the result of that will be a really nice kitchen. If you've ever wondered why I don't do what I eat in a day or cooking videos or recipe videos, something that I really like to do, it's because my kitchen for the last nearly year has been a temporary setup in my shithole basement, and it's something you would not want to see on camera, and I don't even like being down there. And how I got through a 7-month contest prep, cooking tons of meals down there, I'll never know, but I made it. I came out alive. So soon, the kitchen should be done, and there'll be a lot of content coming out of said kitchen, because I love doing that kind of stuff and sharing that with you. Speaking of food, that's what this whole damn thing's about. During that contest prep, as many of you know, and I'm not going to go into long-winded details as I stated, but I chose to incorporate as my nutrition strategy for the prep, carb cycling. And I've talked about this at length on previous videos. And every time I would do one of those videos, there would be a couple people that would ask a question or make a comment. Something along the lines of, hey, are you not doing the carnivore hybrid diet anymore for this prep? And I would say, actually, no, I'm actually doing carb cycling and it's working way better for me. And generally the response would be, oh, okay, as it should be. There was really no hate. There was nobody, like trying to run me and my family out of town with pitchforks and torches. And, it was fairly low key, as it should be, because we're grown adults. And if you are a grown ass adult and you're yelling at people on the internet for what they choose to eat, especially if they are thriving on said food, then you're the problem. You might be an asshole. Pardon my language. I'm trying to do better with that. However, once the dust settled after the competition and I was sort of back in the real world, even though I'm still grinding on a contest prep because now I have to prepare for nationals in July, I do have the luxury of being able to consume a lot more food because I'm trying to rebound from the show I did 3 weeks ago, recomp muscle, work on some lagging body parts, and dial everything again from the experience that I had at the competition to come in even better, because the next show will be at the national level. So there. So I decided, logically, as anyone would expect, I'm going to continue on with the carb cycling because it worked phenomenal for me. And also, being who I am, doing tons of diligent research, checking in with some of the top coaches in the physique competition and bodybuilding community, among others who are just in the training space or even just in the nutritional realm, I opened my horizons and I did a lot of exhaustive research and study just to make sure that I had everything nailed down. There's a short list of top-level bodybuilding coaches that I pretty much aligned with and learned some things from, coupled with my knowledge of the way that I used to eat and work with others in the bodybuilding community way back in the hardcore 90s, which was protein and carbs, and you kept the fat low. That's what they did. Everybody knows this. Chicken and rice, repeat. It's become a lot more nuanced, and we've learned a lot more, as we always learn more about diets after a period of time. And there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to experiment with. And based on all that, I'm going to continue with the carb cycling because it worked phenomenal for me. My performance was better than it's ever been, even at 50, now 57 years old. It was easier for me to achieve an extremely low level of body composition, low body fat, down to about 4% body fat, hands down the most shredded I've ever been. And for me, it was far more sustainable because I never felt so depleted that I was suffering. Because even back when I did a hybrid carnivore diet that still had carbs pre and post workout, and I did refeeds, sort of a cyclical carnivore, I still had periods where I felt like absolute garbage because I was depleting glycogen, never had that fullness, never had that steady stream of energy, and it was just far more difficult. This time around, it was less difficult. Sure, in the last 6-8 weeks, regardless of what diet you're doing, you're going to be suffering a little bit because you're in a severe caloric deficit. But having the ability to bring in that carbohydrate in a manner with which it did not spill over and go through the very expensive physiological process of converting to body fat, it made things a little more tolerable for me through that prep and worked extremely well. That's probably why, if I had to throw a number on it, 98%, maybe more, of all top-level physique competitors in the amateur realm and nearly, I would say, all top pros are doing some form of carb cycling. Now, back to the point. After the competition was over, for some reason, and I got back a little bit more involved in social media, I found that during that period of time, there had launched an internet war where many, many people, including influencers or experts in the carnivore and keto communities, were exiting that. They had decided that some, not all, were starting to experience diminishing returns, and they left and started adding in a little bit more carbohydrate and some a lot of carbohydrate. Whatever. I don't care. You do you. You be you. Because of this, and because some of them were hardcore carnivore influencers, the hate began to spew. And now you're seeing people yelling at each other on the internet, as I said, for what they choose to put in their mouth. Grown adults yelling at each other for what they want to eat, even if they've improved. Make it make sense. Anyway, so once that was occurring and I was no longer in prep and a little bit more involved and was being a little bit more vocal about the changes that I had made and how I had pretty much, let's be honest, moved away from the carnivore diet, but I still love the people in the carnivore space. And I have always said, and I am on record for years, going all the way back to when I started doing videos on YouTube back in, I think, 2015, I had always said, you do what works best for you, and you'll get no judgment and no hate from me. I have more receipts. I am also on record for this entire process. Back when I was the carnivore or excuse me, the ketogenic bodybuilding guy. I literally started a brand. I had always, and I'm on record, stating that even though I was adopting ketogenic principles, I still always had some carbohydrate, generally pre and post workout, and I did glycogen loading refeeds, making it a cyclical ketogenic diet. I called it a ketogenic hybrid. I've said this for years. Back in 2019, actually in late 2018, when I was prepping for a 2019 competition, I had switched that to more of a hybrid carnivore diet. Never being a huge vegetable guy anyway, and liking the way I felt on meat and eggs and fish, it seemed like a no-brainer, and I did well with that. But I'm also on record that I still did pre and post-workout carbohydrates and did cyclical refeeds. So I was never at a point where I was a zero-carb carnivore or on a lion diet, ever. I also have been on record throughout the entire process of stating clearly that I practice a hypercarnivore diet. The literal definition of a hypercarnivore diet is a diet that is 70% or more coming from animal-based sources. What does that mean? That leaves anything within that realm of 30% open to other food sources that are non-animal based, whether it be complex carbohydrates like rice and potatoes, which I ate generally pre and post workout and on refeeds, and I included a little bit of fruit, and I included a little bit of raw honey. I always did. I have also been a guest on YouTube shows with high-level carnivore influencers, all of them which I love and still do, that I explained this to in explicit detail, and none of them had a problem with it because they understood that throughout the entire course of human history, technically, we were more of a hypercarnivore species than we were strict carnivore. There's never been a culture, tribe, or society that has subsisted solely on just meat. That's kind of a new thing. The closest thing you'll get to that were probably the Arctic climate people like the Inuit, and they still weren't zero carb, but they were pretty close. And that's fine. That's the environment they lived in, and they adapted to that, and they did what they had to do to survive. If you're in the ancestral health space or use ancestral health as your reasoning for being a carnivore, then surely you know that it was purely a survival mechanism. And surely, logically and rationally, you know that any of these tribes or hunter-gatherers or whomever they may be, if they stumbled onto a carbohydrate foodstuff like ripe fruit or a honey hive, even root tubers, wild flowers, whatever, they would consume it along with their ultimate goal, which was meat, killing an animal and utilizing that animal nose to tail. So there's never really been a culture or tribe or society that's been 100% zero carb. That's a new thing. That's a new thing that the hardcore carnivores started doing just a few years back. Let me say this very clearly. Even though it technically is kind of a new thing, if it works for you, I applaud it. I say continue to do it. Because it was probably a good thing as an elimination diet in this era we live in now, in this Neolithic culture we're in now, to rescue them from what was probably months or years or decades of abuse, subsisting on highly processed food, industrial seed oils, and having the hyperpalatable combination of both carbs and fat in unison at high levels, which is a train wreck. So the people that are doing higher carb for whatever reason generally lower their fat, where the people that are doing carnivore or keto, they have higher fat and lower carb, non-competing energy sources, which is a smart way to play it. So when I tried carb cycling and I thrived on it, I found no issues with it whatsoever. My performance improved. I was able to recomp muscle. Sleep was actually a little better. Everything was great. I had no ill effects from it whatsoever because the carbohydrate sources I choose and still continue to choose are single ingredient whole foods. White rice, potato, sweet potato, cream of rice, real fermented sourdough breads, organic fruit, raw honey, things of that nature. I have also been on record saying I personally believe that we could cure the obesity crisis if everyone would just switch to single ingredient whole foods, whether it be protein and fat, protein and carbs, whatever. Because the problem has always been, the main problem, for most, not all, is the inclusion of processed foods and these hyper-palatable shit foods that people had destroyed their endocrine system on over years of abuse. Another factor to consider here is the anecdotal evidence. Now, there are some out there in the carnivore space that scream, you can't use anecdotes. Well, I think that's intellectually stupid. Someone like me who makes his living coaching people, thousands of people, who really started to explode in popularity, I'll admit it, because I was in the keto and carnivore space. So there was a lot of people coming to me that were on ketogenic or carnivore diets. But they also came to me because I was known as the guy who was non-dogmatic about these diets. I was never a zealot or treated it like a cult. So many would come to me and say they tried a ketogenic diet for many months, some years, and were starting to get diminishing returns, had found my content and wanted to know if I could help them adjust their ketogenic or carnivore diet to suit their needs better and make them feel better. Oftentimes, that solution was adding back a little bit of carbohydrate, ones that they tolerated well, and many, many, many dozens, multiple dozens of times, those people reported improvements in how they felt, how they performed. But there was always adjustments, and we made those adjustments in real time. We monitored the changes, and then we continued to pivot as needed to find the right nutritional protocol for them. See how this works? Now, it's also indisputable that because of this bizarre-ass internet war, because people are leaving the carnivore space, many of these good people are going on the internet, places like YouTube and Instagram, TikTok and whatever, and honestly reporting that they were having diminishing returns from a long-term carnivore diet or being in possibly long-term ketosis. Some were because they were in a long-term caloric deficit, which is never a good thing either, something I always talk about regularly. I was getting many people, especially women, who even had the blood work and labs to support it that showed after a considerable amount of time on a carnivore diet, they were having thyroid issues, they were having problems with their monthly cycle, their hair was thinning, their performance was shit. And no, it's not because they only did it for 2 weeks. It's not because they did it wrong. And it wasn't because they came up with an excuse just so they could eat carbs because, oh, they must be carb addicts. Or my favorite response from the carnivore community is, you should have just carnivored harder. You didn't do it right. Well, I'm here to tell you, as a coach that works meticulously with his clients, there was a segment of my clientele that had these issues, and we corrected them by adding in a structured amount of carbohydrate till we found what worked for them, and nearly all have reported benefit and a restoration or a reversal of some of the things that were falling apart in their health and performance. Not all. There were some that it didn't help them, and we actually just made some adjustments in their carnivore diet. Usually that is, we increased their total volume of food. They were just starving themselves to death. And I currently, in my group of clients that I have currently with me, still work with many carnivores and many people doing ketogenic diets. I have never once ever sought out a client, completely solicited, and said to them, hey, I'm doing carb cycling. You should too. You need to get rid of that silly carnivore diet. No. I assess all of my clients based on their progress and their results and how they feel and the feedback that I get from them. And if they are thriving on a carnivore diet, I encourage them to continue. So understand that to attack me, a guy who's never been dogmatic about this, who's never been a zero carb lion dieter, who has always approached all of this with logical, rational thought and action, who has always been non-ideological and more results driven, who has always served the needs of his clients first, I approached everything in that manner. And I have also always said, I'm going to do for my clients or anyone else who chooses to listen to me or watch my content what I feel might be the best approach. You can either adopt it, try it, experiment with it, or you can say, no, thank you. Guess who won't be offended? Me. I'm not going to go on the internet and yell at people for what they choose to eat. I'm not going to yell at people for how they choose to train or even not train. I'm not going to yell at anyone because of what their political affiliation is. I'm not going to yell at anyone because of their religious beliefs or lack of. We're grown-ass adults. We should be lifting others up, those of us in a health and fitness space who have this platform, to attack things that are truly destroying people. Standard American or Western diets, overconsumption of seed oils, overconsumption of hyperpalatable foods, too much carbohydrate and sugar, too much fat. The things that are really causing the problem: inactivity, drug addiction, all of the things, dependence on pharmaceuticals that perhaps may be unnecessary. These are the things that we should all unite with each other in these spaces and reach out to the people who truly need help, not arguing amongst ourselves because someone chose not to eat ribeye, salt, and water for the rest of their life. So as this continued on, recently, people were entering my own personal Facebook page as well as a couple of my groups, and they were attacking me unbelievably for the shift that I made in my dietary protocol. Now think about this for 1 minute. If I have been on record for years and years saying that even when I shifted to a carnivore diet, it was a hybrid model based around performance and bodybuilding or hard training, I was eating 70% or more from animal-based sources. Sometimes the other than animal-based sources would be 10%. Sometimes it would be 30%, just based on how I felt and what was going on in my performance for that day. So what you're telling me is a guy who's on record saying there were days where I had 30% non-animal-based food, which guess what, ended up being mostly carbohydrate. If I go from 30% carbohydrate to now 40 or 45%, now I'm public enemy number one? Please make it make sense. So yes, I do not call myself a carnivore or a hypercarnivore any longer. I am eating the way I want to eat. I don't have a named diet associated with me any longer. I am choosing a nutritional path that is best serving my performance goals and what makes me feel great and that is sustainable for me. We are not that fragile for the most part. If you're not metabolically broken, if you're not pre-diabetic or diabetic or full-blown diabetic, if you don't have severe health issues, if you're not morbidly obese, which is a lot of the crowd that listens to me, you can thrive on a diet that has single ingredient whole food carbohydrates along with adequate protein and just enough fat for metabolic purposes. And many can thrive on a meat-heavy carnivore or hypercarnivore diet. We are all bio-individually different from one another to an extent. So you choose the path that works best for you. And because we are not so damn fragile, I do like the fact of knowing that on occasion, on a holiday or one of my children's birthdays or afternoon with my grandson, if I want to have something that someone would classify as a cheat or something that's not nutritionally that great, guess what? I'm not going to be completely broken from that occasional dietary transgression that I will consume every once in a while. I wake up the next morning just fine. I've said many times on these interviews that I spoke of that you have to live your life. There are times when I was very hyper-carnivore where my wife would say, hey, you know what would be great with that steak that we're having on Saturday night on our date night? A freaking potato. My reply would be, you know what? That does sound good because I like potatoes. So I would make the potatoes. Want to know something else? Prior to having that potato, I might be 205 pounds, 10 to 12% body fat, lean, fit, muscular, and healthy. After eating that potato, and even the morning after, I would be 205 pounds, 10 to 12% body fat, healthy, fit, and performing at a high level. So again, to be terrified of a macronutrient like it's some kind of a satanic death sentence is generally ridiculous for those of you who are metabolically healthy and want to choose food that helps you thrive and perform to the best of your ability. So if you're thinking about jumping on one of my social media pages and chastising me because I'm consuming some more carbohydrate now than I was, and those carbohydrates are coming from things like white rice and potato, certain foods that cultures have subsisted on for thousands of years with low morbidity rates and low levels of health issues. You have the Pacific Islanders, Asian cultures who ate a ton of rice along with some meat. You have South American cultures and cultures south of the equator that subsisted on a lot of corn. You have a lot of those cultures that subsisted on a lot of fruit, raw honey, dates, figs, apricots, and the like. And they did just fine. So to suggest that the only way to be metabolically healthy, lean, muscular, and live a long life is to just eat meat for the rest of your life is exquisite bullshit. Let me say it one more time for you in the back in case you haven't been paying attention. Even after all of that, if what you're doing is working for you and you are thriving on it, I encourage you to keep doing it. Please, I am not going to wag my finger at you. I am not going to belittle you, and I'm not going to make you feel bad for how you choose to consume nutrition if it's working well for you and it is a sustainable diet. Because a diet that is not sustainable, one that you feel like you're always sacrificing and always suffering, is not a long-term applicable diet that anyone should be on. So yes, I've made some changes. So if you've been following me because I was Captain Carnivore, I encourage you to continue to do so. I'm still going to give you nothing but honest, transparent truth with everything that I do, and you can weigh for yourself if it's something that you find entertaining, logical, irrational, or just for pure entertainment value. But I can tell you right now, if you leave a nasty comment, I'm going to delete it, because there is no place for grown adults to be behaving in that manner, to be acting like petulant children, angry little toddlers who just stick their fingers in the ears and say, nah, 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 I can't hear you, it's my way or the highway, and throw your little tantrums. Guess what? Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to hear that. So please, behave like an adult and encourage people and be open to rational debate and rational discussion. See, there. Well, maybe this is a video I wanted to make, or definitely should make, because I hope that clears things up. So after watching this, I hope that maybe you'll take a breath, take a step back, keep doing what you're doing if it's working, and if not, entertain the notion that there might be other options out there that might make you thrive and maybe even be more optimal. But that's up for you to decide, because you're a grown adult and you can make those decisions for yourself. And you don't have to be influenced by a bunch of people in an echo chamber who are always telling you that it's their way or the highway. That, my friend, is a cult. So until next time, I'm going to get back to more positive content, talking about training, talking about diet, talking about building muscle, talking about getting lean, and all the things that go in that. And as I stated, soon in my fully updated and remodeled kitchen, I'll be cooking in there and showing you a lot of the things that I do that help me thrive, cool recipes and cool content that you may enjoy. So stick around, enjoy, and if you have any interest at all, it would be my honor and privilege if you'd hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up and all the things. So until next time, go have a nice day, be kind to other people, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm out.